So in the previous video, we got our application buttons working together, the various views on the screen. We're able to actually perform some calculations, but we actually got an error, and I just wanted to show you the error that we actually received. You recall right at the end of the video, we actually managed to get the application to crash, and the reason that it's crashing is it's coming up with an error here, and the error is a number format exception. That's actually the problem, and the reason that's crashing is because it's trying to convert a number into, convert a string into a number, but there was no number in there. So this is what you need to actually keep in mind as a programmer. You need to make sure that your data is valid before you try and process it. So in this case, we need to actually make sure there is a number in there before we try and treat it as a number. And if one or more of the actual numbers aren't valid, we're actually going to come up and print a message to the screen just to indicate that it's invalid. So I'm going to clear that screen off. And incidentally, I just want to run it one more time and just confirm something else, because all we really need to check is to see whether the value is empty. So I know I said that we needed to actually confirm it's a number, but because we've actually used that data type, when we actually run it, now I can type in a number there like so, but I'm actually typing letters now, and because we've set it up as a number, as a decimal, it won't actually accept anything other than numbers. So we can enter a decimal point as well, because we can use enter a number like 45.43 for argument's sake, but we can't use other letters. So what I'm getting at is we don't need to actually verify it's a number. The only thing we need to do is actually check that the actual length of the data that has been retrieved is greater than 0, because we'll know that if anything has been added, it's definitely going to be a number. And that's why it's important when you're developing your forms, just come back in here and have a look, to make sure you actually use the correct data types. In this case, we actually selected and used the format for accepting decimal numbers, and we can come back in here and have a look at that. We're using this Android EMS equals 10, which is basically the combination of that and the input type being number decimal. Is Android will then make sure that the data that we're actually typing in there is actually going to be number. So again, it's important when you're defining the type of data you want to try and use a field, or a view I should say, that's actually got configured in such a way to accept that format for you automatically, and it just saves you having to create a lot of code. So the actual fix for this is actually quite simple. We need to just go back to our main activity, and there is going to be a bit of duplication of code, and actually in later videos we'll talk more about how to reduce this amount of duplication. But what we're going to do is we're just going to repeat it once for each one of our buttons now, and what we need to do is just test to see whether, to make sure that both buttons have got some data, and if they have, then to do our normal processing, otherwise we're going to display an error message. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to type if operand 1 dot get text dot length is greater than 0. Then we'll put and what I need to do is put another bracket there, but I'll come back to that. Operand 2 dot get text dot length greater than 0, like so. If that's the case, we're going to put that code in there like so. And what I need to really do there is to clean this up a bit. We need to explain why I'm doing that shortly. Like that, that should actually fix it up. So what we're doing is we're saying, firstly, if this condition is true and that condition is true, only if both of those are true are we going to try and do this processing in here. So what we're doing there is we're saying we're getting the value, which you've seen before, out of operand 1. Then we're using .length to determine how long that data is. And if there's no data in there, of course, the length is going to be 0, so this will actually fail. So by doing greater than 0 for both of them, we're guaranteeing that we're only going to try processing if both of them have actually got some data in them. And we're going to actually put an else in there, else toast.makeText. We're going to use main activity.this. Oops. We're going to put a message like, please enter numbers in both operand fields. We're going to be toast dot length long, like so. Then we're going to put dot show. I know you've seen that before. So that's the logic we're going to do, and we're just going to basically duplicate that code for each of the other sections. And I'm going to just copy that, space that out a little bit, and I'm going to put else, and we'll come back and add that other code in a minute. And the same for the other two. We're going to do a copy like so. And I'll paste or make sure they're both tabbed over. Else, we'll add that else again shortly. And then the last one, like so. Else. Okay, that's all of them. And then we're going to go back to the first one and just add this text, this toast message. Paste that in there, paste that in there, paste that in there, like so. So we've now got the situation covered. So we're checking to see whether the length is greater than 0 for both operands. If it is, we process it normally. Otherwise, we're going to display a message saying, please enter numbers in both operand fields. Remembering that's the only thing we need to check is to make sure there is some data. So let's try running this. Okay, we'll go back and into the emulator until it resets. So now we should be able to click on plus. Please enter numbers in both operand fields. That's good, that's working. Wait till that disappears. Same for the subtraction, division, and multiplication. That's good. And now if I enter a number in one field, plus, we should still get a message because both aren't. And if I check both of them, we're now getting it working. And of course, if I can delete one, come up to here, delete that, we're going to get the message again. Incidentally, if you want to, by the way, you can click on this little keyboard down here. You can actually choose the keyboard if you want to use it that method. And that's actually as you see it on a real Android device where the actual keyboard comes up on the screen. I generally don't use that when I'm testing an emulator because it's easy just to type numbers. But if you want to see that, that's how you do it. You click on that button and choose, well, in this case, you've only got the one option and you slide that over and actually choose the keyboard that way. So that seems to be working okay. And we can just do this, confirm the same for the other things. And 10 minus is 8. So we can be pretty confident the rest of that's going to be working okay. So we've now fixed that error. So that's good. But there's probably one last thing we need to add to this application now. It'd be actually nice to have like a clear button, which you see on a normal calculator. And the idea of the clear button would be it would clear the contents of both operand 1 and operand 2 and also reset the result back to 0. And I'm sure you've seen that in a real calculator if you've used one before. So to do that, let's go back to Android Studio. And let's go back to our layout firstly. And let's add another button. So we're going to add a little button over here and we're going to call it CLR. So this time I mentioned before when dragging buttons that we should have dragged a small button and how I showed you manually how to change the large button to a small one. Now that we're adding an additional button, we're just going to use the small button and drag that. Put that over there. We're going to change the text. I'm going to call that CLR. And I'm going to call the button BTN Clear. Press enter. And notice how that's automatically been centered, which is pretty cool. And that's because we've got our layout set that way. Okay, so let's go back to the code now. We need to add the code to this button so it actually does something. Go back into main activity. And what we need to do first is we need to add the button. So we're going to private. And it's button, we're going to call that clear this time. And button clear equals button, find view by ID, r.id.button, and there'll be button clear, like so. So what we now need to do is add a listener. And now obviously the code that we're going to be adding is going to be different to these other ones. So we're going to type button clear dot set on click listener. And it's going to be new view dot and press enter. You get to write the code for us. Now the actual code is going to be pretty simple. It's really only a matter of clearing the values of those three fields. And the other thing we're going to do after that is we're going to use something called request focus. And what that does is actually sets the computer or sets the screen to a particular field. So in other words, if you're on the second field, second operand, when you click the clear button, it should clear the values, but then move you automatically to the first operand, ready for you to start typing again. So the commands we need to type in here are firstly operand 1, type 2 there, operand 1 dot, and set text, and all we need to do is pass double quotes like that, and that will actually clear the value. So that's the first one, operand 2 dot set text, same thing. Now for the result, and that was text result dot set text, we don't want to do double quotes for that. What we want to do is 0.00 because that's the default amount, like so, and that clears it back to that. And lastly, the command to focus back onto the first operand, we just type operand 1 dot request focus. That's literally it. So that should be all the code we now need to do for our application. We should be able to test that and actually see what it does. So let's just run that. Okay, we'll tab back over. We've now got our clear button. So obviously pressing clear now is not doing anything, but if we click on to the second up-around field and click on clear, notice how the cursor went back there. So let's now type in some calculations, or a calculation. Plus, we've got 18. So now if I press clear, it clears the two values completely, and it also resets the amount to 0.00. So that's it. That's our application. Yes, it was a pretty basic calculator, but hopefully it still helped you to understand some basics of Android apps. And what we've done in this section, just as a recap, well, we created the interface, obviously. We created our mini calculator. We learned about the linear layout. And hopefully you've now got a good understanding of how to use that for both horizontal layouts and also vertical ones, and to build up an interface that way. Then we did some work with classes, with the on-click listeners and so forth. We talked about naming conventions, and we really put a lot of the information that we've learned in previous sections of the course together to build an application that actually did something pretty useful other than just a button click. But that's it. That's the calculator application now finished. In the next section, we're going to move on to a more complex application, and we're going to look at starting to do more complex things like downloading applications from the internet and things of that nature. So I'll see you in that next section.